Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to a special episode of the Music Podcast. I call it a special episode because I had initially intended to obviously have this come out on Thursday and Friday, but I figured because Michael's birthday falls at the beginning of the week as opposed to at the end of the week, that I need to have something to actually commemorate the day of his birth, and I figured why not do a double episode. I say a double episode because I had intended, like I said, to have this out on Thursday and Friday, but then thought to myself I needed something to actually really commemorate his birthday. So I decided to talk about really the visual aspect of him as an artist and how really it's the visuals that I think kind of sent me over the edge every time that he came on a screen. So I wanted to really do that and dive a little bit into what that is and what that means. And so, yes, this is going to be a two-part episode, and I hope that you enjoy. If you sit through the entire thing, I already appreciate you, and I hope that this has been as fun for you as it's been for me. So, thank you for joining me on this journey, and let's get to it.
Music.
Okay, so obviously, when talking about Michael Jackson, there's no possible way you can have any sort of discussion or discourse about the man and not talk about his short films. Obviously, for him, this was an extension of his artistry. I think that he kind of put everything into his musicianship, and that included what kind of visuals he could get out of them. And so I want to talk about my top 5 Michael Jackson videos. And I will go in descending order. So from 5 to 1. And I'm going to tell you straight up right now, I cheated so bad. Most of the list, there are ties, okay? And there's not three-way ties or anything. It is just two-way ties, but there's ties for pretty much every position on this list. But I have reasons, and I want to try to get through them as quickly as possible. And but I really do kind of just want to go through videos that made very deep impressions on me, and I'm sure deep impressions on anybody who watched any of his short films. Because again, if you know anything about Michael, music video was a taboo phrase for him. They were short films. And honestly, he was not wrong. As when he really got into his stride of creativity when it came to his visuals, they really would technically constitute short films, especially the ones that are on this list. Most of them had a timestamp of over 15 minutes. So it kind of makes sense that he would call them short films, and I think that if he really wanted to, some of them he could have entered into like film festivals, because they were just, in terms of just length and in terms of production quality and how much went into them, they really are films in and of themselves. They're not just, for him, I believe, because he also was a huge fan of film. I think I mentioned that before, and he loved older films specifically, but he was a big fan of film. He knew directors, he understood symbolism when it came to visuals, and I think that when there were instances when the songs weren't necessarily enough to convey the story that he wanted, he would dive into short films. Let's not get it twisted though. He did all of these things because he obviously wanted to be on top. He wanted to be the best. And when MTV was sort of in its heyday, he kind of ruled the channel, and it's because everything that he released was an event. But these were not just advertising or PR for the song. These weren't just clips in order to get popularity for a single. Obviously, that's what they did, but I think in his mind, if he was going to do something like this, it had to have substance and had to have content. And in fact, he said that about possibly arguably his most well known famous video, Thriller. He said that when they were going back, MTV was doing a retrospective of music videos for him, or not for him, but for the channel. MTV was doing a retrospective on the greatest videos of all time, and obviously Michael Jackson filled up a very large portion of that list. Basically, in the 80s and in the 80s particularly, Michael Jackson made that channel what it is, and I do not feel bad saying it, especially since MTV really didn't have a lot of love for him to begin with, but certainly as he got older and his behaviors became a little bit more erratic to a public, to public eye, they really took every opportunity they could to kind of disrespect him. So we're not going to get into that. We're going to just dive in right now. I've spent 5 minutes talking about everything surrounding the sort of ethos of his love for visual storytelling. And so now I want to dive a little bit into this. So the way that I made this list, and I had to kind of give myself criteria, which I think everybody does subconsciously, but I had to actually write this down because I had to make a decision about a couple things that might be a little bit shocking to people, but I had to do it based on some form of criteria so that it would not seem random, at least for me. So the number one criteria for me for a short film, because like I said, his visual aids, if you will, were short films. Even if they were about 5 minutes, the scope and the cinematics and the drama and the spectacle of them are fitting of something that's more film than it is video clip, right? So, first and foremost, what I'm considering is the direction and the aesthetics and cinematography. That's something that I'm definitely focused on when it comes to what for me makes the best short film. Because again, we're talking about actual film, and in actual film, beyond the scripting and beyond the actors and beyond the costuming, the direction really does drive what it is you're supposed to get out of the story. It's the writing and the direction, I believe. I am not a film person. I'm not, in fact, a film critic. I do love talking about certain films and certain aspects of film, but it's not my forte. But I do understand that writing and direction really do kind of sculpt what your experience is going to be when you go to watch a film. The next thing is the choreo, because obviously it's got to be the choreo. I almost switched the direction in the choreo, but really, if we're talking about visuals, it has to be about the direction and the aesthetics. But this is Michael Jackson. And so, second, and very close second, like almost interchangeable, would have to be the choreography. Because when you're talking about visual representations of his music, the dancing was the biggest part of that for him. I think the videos were certainly, or the short films, excuse me, were definitely an extension of the songs and the stories he was trying to tell, but the dancing was such an integral part of him as a human, not just as an artist. Movement was so tightly integrated with the music for him that there were times when he'd be in the studio, and if something got real good to him, he would stop singing and he would run outside the studio and dance. That's how strong dance is for him as just a human. He has to dance, he has to move. And music and dance, I think, were interchangeable for him. I think that they kind of lived within the same realm and same spectrum. So that has to be part of the criteria, is the choreo. Next is the storyline, because you cannot, as I mentioned before, the writing and the direction, that drives what you're going to be feeling when you watch a film. So it has to have a very strong storyline and some very strong writing. Even if the storyline is very simple, it's got to be something that draws you in and actually invests you to the point that you're actually going to watch something for longer than 3 minutes. Because make no mistake, anything that Michael released, it wasn't going to be something simple when it came to what you're going to watch on the screen. The question is, how was he going to keep your attention? Obviously with the direction and the choreo, but if the storyline's not there, nobody's really going to care. And the storyline, I think part of that is because it's built around the song. Like, the song is the foundation, and the song is the script. It's the storyline. That's the script that you're following. So storyline, and then obviously the song. And I did say that song is the storyline, but there are treatments that have nothing to directly do with the actual song, and you'll get that with some of the music videos like Thriller and Bad and Smooth Criminal. The storylines themselves, the treatments that they were given, really don't have a lot to do with the song. So the song is lower on the list, but that's again because we're talking about the aesthetics. We're talking about the representation of the song, and so the visual part of that has to be kind of the most important. But the song, I think, for me, does have to play a big role. That is the soundtrack, right? That is the reason for the video, is the song. So the song has to make an impression on me. The song has to be something that I is one of the ones that I enjoy. It's one of the ones that I like. So that has to be part of it. And the last thing, obviously, when we're talking about visuals, you have to talk about the makeup and you have to talk about the costuming. And I think that nobody can deny that when it comes to the aesthetics, nobody actually did it the way that Michael did. There's a lot of people who are fashion conscious, a lot of them who are fashion icons, but MJ was very much certainly part of that iconic cadre, if you will, of people who are known for how they dress. And that being part of the short films obviously plays a huge part in that. Okay, so those are my criteria. Let's go through it one more time. Direction and aesthetics, choreo, storyline, song, costume design, and makeup. Okay, so I decided to go about this by writing down all of the videos that were my favorites. All of the ones that I remember having the deepest impact on me. This is why this list sucks so bad. I was initially thinking of doing a top 10. I was like, no, I'm going to challenge myself. It wasn't much of a challenge because I have so many ties, but I'm just saying, I want to narrow this down. And some of them are not exactly, I guess, short films. Certainly not short films, but they still had an impact on me. And there's one in particular I'm thinking about, and any Moonwalker I think is going to know automatically what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my honorable mentions. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Human Nature. There is not an official video for that. If you see something on YouTube, which I just did, because let me just back up a little bit and say there's a mini story time in this. I remember seeing the Moonwalker tape, like the whole experience of it, and there was just an animated clip of Human Nature that is actually done in what looks like watercolor and chalk, and it's just a pair of boots walking down some stairs through a neighborhood. There's sort of an animation of some graffiti that scrolls across the wall, and then there's just stills of him, just pictures of him from magazines, right? It's not a video, but it's a visual representation of that song that I don't think there's any other way that you could have represented Human Nature. It's maybe 15 seconds. This is why it has to be an honorable mention and not on the list, because it's not an actual video, let alone a short film. But it had such a huge impact on me. Visually, it's just so stunning, and it came like right in the middle. It came right sort of it was in the Thriller era of that video of the Moonwalker retrospective, I guess is the best way to put that. And it was not like any other part of that video. That entire retrospective was really fantastic. And if I guess I want to say there, short film, that retrospective from Jackson 5 to the current era, which is the bad era, that's when Moonwalker came out. That that in and of itself is phenomenal, especially my two favorite clips of that actually. I'm not trying to harp on this too long, but my two favorite clips actually from the retrospective are Human Nature is the first one because it just came out of nowhere, but also the dancing machine. Oh my gosh. And also because the sound is so crispy in that part, I don't even know how I managed to hear that part of the video, the dancing machine part, so clearly. But it was so crispy in my ear, me watching the TV, and it sounded like surround sound. And whatever. So, Human Nature. The other honorable mention is Can You Feel It? And Dick Clark tells a story about how Michael came to him for American Bandstand back when American Bandstand was popping off. And he came to him and said, I want to show you this film. And Dick Clark's like, what are you talking about? We don't show films. This is a dance show. Like, why would I want to see a film? He showed it to him, and Dick Clark was speechless. Like, he gasped, and he didn't understand what he was seeing. But, some of the earliest actual visual representations of songs, and this also is a short film. Can You Feel It is a legitimate short film. I think it clocks in at something like 11 minutes. Like it's an epic. It has a whole narration. There's a cast. The coloring is like eerie but cool, and like all of the brothers are giants. Like they're like, think of them in Majora's Mask. Like they're the giants from all corners of the world, and they're coming together to bring peace. And there's a rainbow involved, and like Tito is playing the guitar and putting the stars in the sky. Like it's such an epic video. And so that's why I had to put it on the honorable mentions. Now, when we get to my actual videos, I'm going to give a little bit of just background information, just basic background information of like the credits for the video and if it won any awards, and then I'll go in a little bit about what it is that I love about the video. So here we go. 15 minutes in and we are starting the list. Okay, so number 5 is a tie. Number 5 is Remember the Time and The Way You Make Me Feel. Remember the Time absolutely has to be on this list because it's one of the single most iconic, historically short films. It is a short film. This is around that time when people, obviously because he looked a lot different than when he did Thriller. His skin was so much lighter. And so the rumors around him not liking black people or blackness started circulating heavily, especially within the black community. He made a video that had never been made before. The entire cast is black. Every single person in that video is black. Nothing but brown, gorgeous, glowing melanin, and it takes place in ancient Egypt. And you have Iman, who is playing the Empress, right? And then you have Eddie Murphy, who is playing her husband, and you have Magic Johnson, who's playing the Heavy, and he's hitting the gong, and the dancers are all black, and it's a gorgeous video. It's a fun video. It's so much fun, and it's funny. This is the first time that we actually see Michael kiss somebody in a video. He kisses Iman, and I'm like, I don't know who's luckier. Because listen, have you seen Iman? Have you seen her now? Okay, so let's just leave it at that. Okay, so the information for that, Remember the Time was released, the video, in 1992, and the director's black. It was directed by John Singleton, obviously legendary director, Boys in the Hood, and he epitomizes the black experience, especially in the early to mid 90s. John Singleton directed it, and it was choreographed by the absolutely legendary Fatima Robinson. Give this woman her flowers. She has worked on some of the most incredible music videos. Her choreography is always so laced and so thick and so representative of her blackness and her womanhood. Even though she choreographed for a lot of guys, by the way. A lot of guys were knocking on her door. I know that she did a lot of the Backstreet Boys videos. She did, feel like she did a Britney video. I feel like she did a Destiny's Child and Beyonce video. Like, she's done so much, and just with icons, absolute icons of the game. So give Fatima Robinson, side note, give Fatima Robinson her flowers right now. She deserves it, and she deserves all of your respect. So I will not have anybody not talking about Fatima Robinson as one of the absolute greatest choreographers to come out of a stable of great choreographers in that era, because she is unreal. Okay, so that's my whole spiel on Remember the Time. Gorgeous video, great costuming, incredible, elaborate, large set pieces. He really went out of his way to elevate blackness. That's why this video is on my list. The choreography is fun. The dance routine is great. It makes you actually want to get up and learn it. It's so fantastic. And what's even more iconic is the fact that he performed this at the Soul Train Music Awards, and you can tell he had planned on dancing elaborately because he was not mic'd up. But he broke his ankle before the ceremony. So he sat in a chair and lip-synced and danced in the chair. And the entire audience like, go Michael, go Michael. He is dancing in a chair and giving one of the best performances of the evening. So iconic all around, just iconography up and down and through everything surrounding Remember the Time. The Way You Make Me Feel makes it on this list, and it's so far down because it's not necessarily one of my favorite songs by him. It's catchy and it's cute and it does all of the things. It has throwbacks to sort of like 1950s, slicker, cool type of song. But it's not really my taste. And, that's fine. That's fair. I think it's fair. So, but the reason why this is even on the list when I talk about the song not being my favorite is because that opening sequence is stupid. So let me get into the credits of The Way You Make Me Feel. The Way You Make Me Feel came out in 1987. It's the Bad album. It was directed by Joe Pytka. The choreographer was Vincent Patterson, and he worked with Michael in this era quite a bit. The reason why this is on the list and tied with something as iconic as Remember the Time is because after the whole sequence of him it's just B-roll, basically, of them in the hood. That's just what it is. It's just B-roll of him being in the hood. This is another thing. Everybody in this video is a person of color. Okay? So, and he has this conversation with an elderly gentleman. It's the legendary Joe Seneca, who played Willie Brown in Crossroads, and that was my introduction to him. And then The Way You Make Me Feel. And he has this sort of conversation with this elder about why he can't, essentially why he doesn't fit in, which was a big, that was a big thing for him around this time. I mean, he mentions it a lot on the album itself, even on the ballads, him not being able to fit in. He sort of is getting, he's getting a little bit dogged on by the people in the neighborhood because he's just a gentle dude and, he wears his shirt tied up and he's trying to act a certain way and it's not working. Because he's just getting made fun of. He's getting, not bullied necessarily, but he's just being mocked because it's like, bruh, you soft as new bread. What you mean you coming over here trying to be in our crew, right? That sort of thing. And then Tatiana comes through the video. She comes through, little black dress, bangles, hair, gorgeous, right? And Michael stands up and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get this girl. Of course you're not. She look him up and down and then just keep on walking. The part that puts this on the list is the fact that he screams, right? He says, hey! He screams and everything stops. Everything is silent. And then he's like, at this point, I'm sick of people passing me over. I'm sick of them just looking at me like I ain't nothing. He snaps his fingers. Misogynistic as all heck, yes. Because do not snap your fingers at me. And she had that look on her face. She was like, no, I know you ain't snapping at me. Like, you snapping at me? Who are you even? So she's looking at him like he's lost his mind. But he comes up to her. He stopped her in her tracks. He comes up, he snaps a few more times, and then he sings for the first time. It's complete silence. And it's a cappella, live. This man sings,
"You knock me off of my feet now, baby."
and when I tell you my brain short-circuited the first time I saw this, I couldn't handle it. It was too much. So that in and of itself, and I think the director also, the director just stopped everything because he's just like, he couldn't even breathe. Everybody stopped. Like, he had to yell cut because nobody could move. Nobody could function after he did that. This voice is just resonant and demanding. And then the ending choreo, sort of giving West Side Story, very much West Side Story, but of course, when you have Vincent Patterson as the choreographer, it kind of makes sense because he is kind of that school of the real classic, semi-Fosse, but very much balletic, if you will, very jazz. And so you have that in the last scene, but it's so gorgeous because it's complete. It's an icy blue tone, and it's a water fountain that's exploded. Not a water fountain, but a hydrant that's exploded. So you have that visual of just water cascading upwards, and you have 6 dancers, including Michael, in unison doing this very simple kind of, if you will, and I hate to put it this way, but it is kind of a mating ritual to get him noticed by this girl that's been running away from him the entire video. But he does this dance and she goes looking for him. And at the end they hug. And those 2 scenes are so powerful visually in my mind and even orally that I couldn't neglect to put this on the list of my favorite videos, because those 2 moments, in terms of just how visceral my reaction was to them, 2, I think, in my opinion, 2 of the greatest moments, not whole in terms of concept and in terms of short film, but just in terms of moments, 2 of the most powerful moments in any video that he released. I don't care. I just personally think so. So that's number 5, my 2-way tie between Remember the Time and The Way You Make Me Feel. Number 4, I know, is going to be a little bit of a surprise considering how elaborate this is. And also, I want to make it clear, when I talk about his short films, I am talking about the films, not the music video versions. I am talking about the full spectrum of film, which means some of them are as long as an hour. Ghosts is an hour long. And this next one falls at about 20 minutes. Like, it's a good one. It's a good long one. But it's a 2-way tie between Bad and Speed Demon. And it's, funnily enough, they come back to back at, they're back to back on the Moonwalker tape, right? Bad, obviously one of the most iconic short films of all time, but certainly in his repertoire. Bad came out in 1987. It was directed by the absolutely legendary, and it's so ridiculous that he directed a music video, Martin Scorsese, a man who needs no introduction whatsoever. The choreography was Michael himself, Greg Berge, and Jeffrey Daniel, again, someone he'd worked with a couple times in the past and during this era. He was the one that kind of helped inform his quote-unquote street style of dancing when it came to actually integrating it into his choreography. So Bad is number 4, and it's mainly because it's not my favorite song from him. And I know that's so weird. A lot of people love that song, and I know it's a lot of people's favorite song, period. Bad is not my favorite song. I think musically what it does with the dynamics is fantastic, but it's just, it doesn't hit for me. And I don't know if there's a subconscious part of me that doesn't necessarily believe him when it comes to the song, but something about it doesn't, for me, it does not function without the video. And the video is powerful. But that's the reason why it's so low, because if the song depends on the video, for me, now it doesn't have to be that for anybody else, but for me, if the song depends on the video, it can't really hold up to anything else that comes above it for me. But visually, oh my gosh, that first sequence that is an actual film where you have a character, Michael was playing an actual character that is not his name, because in every other short film where there's a script, it's him. He's playing himself. In this one, he's playing an actual character. He's playing a character named Daryl, who went away for school. He was at a boarding school, and then it's, you know, an upper echelon, very preppy school. He has whole lot of white people that are just his friend because, you know, he's the token black friend. He gets on the subway and he meets another brown boy who came from the same school, but they live in about the same neighborhood. And, you know, they have that camaraderie. We're two brown kids that are going to this predominantly white institution, and we both come from the hood. And I love that connection that they have on the subway. Daryl has been a little bit far removed from his home. And so at first he's a little bit uncomfortable because this dude keeps staring at him. But it's like he got on a nice coat. He got on leather gloves. And so he sort of is kind of checking him out. He's not sure where this guy sort of lands when it comes to his attitudes about sort of black and brown people being in like a preppy environment. But the dude, you know, they talk for a second, and the dude says, "How many people you got proud of you?" And Daryl, aka Michael, Daryl says 3. And the Latino, he says, "Man, I got 4 people proud of me." And they just share this moment, and it's so great, and I love it. And essentially, Daryl goes home, back to his hood, back to his friends. His mom's not home, and it seems, in terms of just the tone of him coming back home to the small apartment that he shares with his mom, that this is something that's regular. She's usually out, and it probably is because she's got more than one job, and she leaves dinner for him. She knows he's coming back, but she's not there to greet him, so he goes out to find his friends. First of all, let me go back a little bit. The opening shot of this film, the opening shot is so gorgeous. It is literally just him. It's zoomed in on his face. Martin Scorsese zooms in on his face and just watches him raise his face. And it's so jarring and it's so striking. His eyes are big and gorgeous. Cheekbones to the gods. Hair laid. Like, it's such a phenomenal opening shot. And of course, it's Martin Scorsese. What else are you going to expect except perfection? And that was a perfect opening shot for a music video. Yes, short film, because that is what it is. There's no mistaking that this is a short film. This is absolutely a short film. But at the end of the day, he's directing a video for a single. And that's the reason why it's so low on the list, because the song does not hold up for me without the video. It doesn't make an impression. For me, it doesn't make an impression without the video. The song for me needs the short film, and that's why it just can't hold up to the other songs and short films that are on this list, because I just think that, I know that song was kind of lower on my criteria, but it is still very important because that's the reason for the short film, is the song. And so if the song does not make an impression, then it can't be that high for me. So Bad's amazing. It's the introduction of Wesley Snipes, and oddly enough, Michael and Wesley struck up a pretty good friendship. I don't know how much long after this, but they became friends. Wesley knows a lot about Michael, especially in terms of his dedication, love, ardor, and respect for his people, and how learned he was. But their dynamic in this video, this is the first time not the first time, because The Wiz, right? And then Captain EO, but listen, nobody talks about Captain EO. But really, when you talk about acting, now let's get this straight. Michael always was very dedicated to anything he did, so he really did want to study acting and become good at it. He didn't do a whole lot of it, though, and anything he did after The Wiz and after actually this, it's inconsequential. But he did, I think, his most powerful acting in the Bad video, and he could have taken that somewhere if he really wanted to, because I think obviously he's working with real actors. He's working with the greatest at that time, especially one of the absolute greatest directors of all time, and he's working with Wesley Snipes, who this is his first major role, and Wesley brought so much out of Michael. There's so much passion, and he's so steeped into this role of Daryl. Again, he's actually playing a character here. Outside of The Wiz, like, and Captain EO. Again, nobody talks about Captain EO. But outside of that, this is the most profound he's ever done when it comes to an acting job. Yes, it's over the top. Yes, you can tell this is not something he regularly does, but he goes for it. And he really invests himself in this character that he's playing. And it's so incredible to watch. I also have to give shout outs to the actual dance section, the actual song of the short film, the music of the music video. The dancing in this is fantastic. It's amazing. It's not the best from this era, and I don't think it's not the best in terms of all that he's done, but the layers of it, again, it's this sort of play on West Side Story, and it's done so beautifully, and it does come out of nowhere. I can understand why people kind of think this video is goofy, because it starts with this really riveting and dark and veritas laden intro of him coming back to his neighborhood and having to confront his past and confront his friends who think he's changed because of where he's been. And, you know, they try to convince him to go back and do, basically, when he was there, before he went to school, that's probably why he's in boarding school, he used to be a banger, because they want him to come back to doing what he used to do, acting a fool, trying to, you know, lift people for bus money. Like, they try to put him back into that environment, and it doesn't suit him anymore. And so his way of expressing that he's trying to get out of that is to have a whole dance break. Video is completely done in slate gray until you get to the dance part, and that's when all the color happens. The iconic leather belt buckle outfit with the bull's boots. The 1989 Bulls shoes with the golden bull in the back and just buckles and zippers everywhere. Iconic. And it is goofy in the larger context of the story, but this is, and the fact that it goes right back to sort of this slate gray black and white situation means that this is just sort of how he envisions he would be able to get out of this situation. That's not how it goes normally, and in fact the story was kind of based on a headline he saw about a kid coming back from a prep school who his former friends didn't appreciate. He came back a little bit different, or they perceived him as being different, and so they killed him. And I think what I heard was that he was mixing up a couple different stories, but it was kind of that idea of being this black person coming from a specific type of narrative and going off into something completely different and coming back a little bit different yourself, and how people look at you like they don't know you anymore. Even the people on the street corner knew Daryl. Like, they knew who he was. They knew what he used to be up to. They knew who he rolled with, and it just didn't sit comfortable with him anymore. And so this dance break, I really do genuinely think was kind of a fantasy in his brain of, this is how I can get out of this. And so I think, as goofy and as out of place as it kind of may seem, it's interesting if you dive a little bit deeper into why this might have been the avenue to go, besides the fact that it's Michael Jackson, and of course there has to be an elaborate dance break, especially when you have a choreographer like Jeffrey Daniel and Greg Burge just going in there, and MJ's obvious love for West Side Story and musicals, and how all of those things kind of marry, and also there's bits of Fosse in this, but all of these things kind of marry to create this incredible break piece that, while a little out of place, is just really beautifully executed. The tie in this one is Speed Demon, and it's because anything that Will Vinton does is going to be my favorite thing. Point blank, period, that's it. There's literally no other reason why this is even on the list. It's because Will Vinton produced it. He didn't direct it. Let me go into the actual credits for this. The Speed Demon video was released in 1988. It was actually directed by Jerry Kramer, but Will Vinton produced it. If you don't know who Will Vinton is, and you might not if you're a little bit younger, he is basically the king, not the person who invented it, I don't believe, but the absolute king of claymation. Clay-based stop-motion animation. He just is beyond. He made entire stories and visual narratives using clay, and it's frightening and uncanny and weird, and it's my favorite thing. One of my favorite absolute anything for the longest time, and and it's not even longest time like, I was 5 and then 6. No, from when it came out to probably when the last couple years, my favorite thing of all time was Will Vinton's Christmas special. It's because, and I mainly remember it because the dinosaurs were so weird, and the chubby dinosaur was always mixing up Christmas carols with food, and the one that I remember was waffle. And the waffles looked so good when he finally got the waffles he wanted. But it also had the California raisins, and that's kind of where that connection with Michael came in. There was a Pepsi commercial, and they were kind of connected through that. For a long time, Michael was sponsored by Pepsi. Like, he would do Pepsi commercials and things like that, and then the California raisins were also kind of part of that scene. And so he decided to produce, because he didn't direct, but he did produce the Speed Demon video, and it's basically comes right after the kids version of the Bad video. That's why I said they're sort of the same thing. They come one right after the other because they're on the Moonwalker tape. So the Bad video is separate, but with Martin Scorsese, the entire production is that its own thing. But in the Moonwalker video, he does a child version of it, and it starred a young Brandon Adams from my hood of Topeka, Kansas. Woot woot. A young Brandon Adams playing the kid version of Michael Jackson, or Daryl, if you will. And I think once the dance break happened, he's no longer Daryl, he's Michael Jackson, which I can probably go into why I think that's really brilliant. But anyway, so right after the kid version of Bad, they go through sort of like a thing of fog. Like, it's a wall of fog coming from the studio where they're shooting the Bad video. And everybody's a child. So you have the child version of Michael, the child version of his security guards, you have the child version of his manager. And as soon as this fog lifts and they come out of the studio lot, they're all adults. And the thing that's crazy is that it's half live action, half claymation. So you have live action interactions between MJ and these clay figures who are his fans, who are chasing him, who turn absolutely evil when they see him. And I'm not even saying that to be any kind of way about his fans or about fan culture. I'm talking about their faces completely change. It's when I'm talking about uncanny. Will Vinton was the master of the uncanny, and the clay models of these characters are frightening, and yet it's so fun, it's so good. And they go on this chase, and Michael goes into a room where there's a whole bunch of costumes because he's cornered between, he interrupted a filming. And so the guys that he interrupted, apparently he's done this multiple times, the guys he interrupted are mad, and they're trying to come after him and get him for messing up their shot again. And then on the other side, he's pinned in by paparazzi who don't know he's there yet, but he goes into a costume room, and he sees this huge head of Spike the Bunny, and he decides that he's going to be incognito, and he goes out, and they're like, oh, that's not him. We saw Michael go in here, but the dude who came out is this rabbit. What's he doing? Get out of there. And so he goes and he speeds off. He grabs somebody's bicycle. Some poor child is missing his bicycle because Spike the Bunny stole his bicycle. It has a basket and everything. And, he does a little move that shows that it's him, like he wants to be chased. And so he ends up being chased, and he goes through the city limits, and he transforms into all these different characters, including Sylvester Stallone and Pee Wee Herman, and Whoopi Goldberg. I think it's a version of Whoopi Goldberg, and I could be completely wrong, because she had straight hair, and Whoopi had always been rocking locks for the longest time. But, yeah, so the video ends. He finally gets away from these hordes of fans because they're speeding, Speed Demon, and that's the whole point of the song. He's speeding, trying to get away, headed for the border. It's on my mind. Nothing really matters. I gotta be on time. Essentially, it's another song that I also think does not stand alone very well. The sounds on it are really fun, and it's a fun song, I think, and I understand what's happening in terms of what the messaging is, but it doesn't, for me, it does not hold up without the visual. That's why both Bad and Speed Demon are in the number 4 slot, but they're on the list anyway because visually, just they're unreal. And then the Speed Demon video ends with a dance break between Michael and the animated costume of Spike Bunny, and it's Michael choreographed it. It seemed like it was an improv dance, and so he just goes for it, and it's so much fun. It's so cool. It's an amazing bit of choreography. I think some of his best choreography is when it's less than a minute long. This obviously is a little bit longer. I think it's about a minute and a half, 2 minutes of dance, and he gets semi arrested. He gets a ticket for dancing. Like there's no MJ allowed in these parts. And so, he's and the Pike had turned into a motorcycle, so MJ in his still be zippered leather outfit is on this motorcycle, and then the cop goes away. He's about to go off into the desert, and Spike morphs into a face on the mountain. And I went through that entire scenario because it is one of those videos that has to be seen to believe if you've never seen it. And it's the perfect placement on the Moonwalker tape because it comes right before Leave Me Alone. Number 3 is the only standalone on this list. And there's a reason for that. Stranger in Moscow comes right dead center in the middle at number 3. It is one of the most gorgeous videos and songs I believe that MJ has ever done. And again, he does call them short films, but this one is, I think, the only one that constitutes an actual single video because there's no real story. There's no large overarching storyline beyond what the lyrics are saying. This is one of, I think, the few videos that are a direct connection to the song. Let me just put it out there. Every single short film on the History album that was released as a single is beyond gorgeous. The reason why not all of them are on this list is because there's some that I just think are better, but in terms of what they do, what they represent, the style, the storytelling, the costuming, like in terms of just the visual of it and what it means to be a short film, there are so many more that are better than what's on History. But in terms of just how it looks, every single video that was released as a single is gorgeous from the History album. And Stranger in Moscow is the most beautiful one on that came from that album. And I think the most beautiful also in terms of the song. I think it is the most beautiful song on the History album. And I've talked about it before. It is one of my favorite songs on the album. It's not the absolute favorite, but I think it's my second favorite song on there. So Stranger in Moscow, released in 1996. It was directed by Nicholas Brandt, and I have to shout out the cinematographer on this one too because it's so stunning. The cinematographer was Joseph Yacoa, Yacoa, and it's... I don't want to go too heavily into it because it's really straightforward. The song opens with I Was Walking in the Rain, and that's basically what it is. It's Michael walking in the rain, perceiving everything around him. It's sort of this idea of him being invisible and other people feeling like they're also invisible. So nobody sees him, but nobody sees these people who feel like they're kind of ostracized from everybody. Even a child who's playing with his friends feels like he's not part of the friend group. It's like you're the least important person in the friend group. And it's so isolating and it's so jarring. And it comes right after you have a lot of high tension, high stakes videos like Scream and They Don't Really Care About Us. You have this really soft, melodic, melancholy, morose, heartbreaking piece of music with one of the simplest videos that he's ever created. It's just him walking in the rain, observing everything. The cinematography is so gorgeous. You have moments where the rain slows down. When it hits somebody's palm, it slows down in slow motion. You see the impact that the raindrop has on somebody's hand, how it has an impact on his face. Like there's shots of him just standing there in the rain, head toward the heavens. He's drenched in rain and he's just feeling this connection with nature, with the rain, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And so I had to put it at number 3. The way I'm talking about it makes it seem like it should be higher than that, but there's a reason for that, and that's because number 1 and number 2 are so important. Okay, so I'm gonna move past Stranger in Moscow, but just know that you absolutely should watch that video. If you're looking for something that's a little more subtle, if you're looking for something that's less spectacle and more personal, and something that has a lot more, I think, actual truth to it, some actual raw emotion and honesty from Michael himself, you have to watch Stranger in Moscow and kind of just jump off from that. If you're looking for videos that are less about the spectacle of it, because this was not about that, I don't think. I don't even think he had the energy. Like, that's not the energy that I get from most of what was happening from the History album, except for 1 or 2 songs where it's just like epic. But Stranger in Moscow, watch it, love it the way that I love it, because it's beyond gorgeous. Listen to the song first. I will recommend listening to the song first, because the video, they do kind of go hand in hand. It's not like the video elevates the song, but the video does so much to visually represent what that song is about. So, number 2, which is, again, I'm pretty sure going to be a surprise to some people. Number 2 is a 2-way tie between Smooth Criminal and Thriller. And this is going to be a pattern for the number 1 and number 2 spot, where the videos are where they are because they're so similar in different ways. Let me just put it out here, right here and now. Smooth Criminal is the best choreography for me in a Michael Jackson video. I do not care. And let me tell you the reason why the dynamic I have between Smooth Criminal and Thriller is the way that it is. Because Thriller is the most iconic video period from him, and the late, great, phenomenal, gorgeous, brilliant Michael Peters co-choreographed this. And obviously, Michael Peters. I have nothing but incredible things to say about him and about his work. And especially for the time period of what he was doing, untouched, unmatched. Michael Peters. Again, give this man his flowers. You didn't give him his flowers when he was here. Somebody give him his flowers now, because Michael Peters was a brilliant mind. He did a lot of choreography work. Well, he did Beat It also. And he also did the Motown 25 choreography. And if you've never seen, not the Motown 25 in terms of the individual artist performances, he did them with the cast. The ensemble performances, the cast choreography was Michael Peters. So the opening number for Motown 25, and then the I Want You segment. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to dedicate so much time to Michael Peters and just Motown 25 at some point. But you must, absolutely. If you want to get an idea outside of Michael Jackson, what Michael Peters was capable of, you must watch Motown 25, because it's just so black and so gorgeous and so steeped in, like, it just seems like it's steeped in, like, earth tones. And it's so soulful. Michael Peters had soulful choreography. That being said, Smooth Criminal ethers Thriller when it comes to choreography. And that is why they're both at number 2. I think when you talk about the actual aesthetics, there's a lot of things that are kind of give and take with this. So I think Thriller is a better song. It's more interesting to me, especially the history surrounding it. It's more interesting. I mentioned this before. It used to be a love song called Starlight Love. It wasn't hitting, and then he decided to throw some throw some D's. No, that's not what I was going to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But no, he decided to throw some eerie synth, get another Rod Temperton joint. You know, you're going to get something completely different and interesting when you throw Rod Temperton on anything, okay? So, came Thriller. Lyrically, it's so much more thematic and atmospheric, and it's just so much more fun of a song for me than Smooth Criminal. However, the choreo, which is higher on the list now. Remember, my list said direction, aesthetic, choreo, storyline, and then song. The song is better in Thriller. The choreo is unmatched in Smooth Criminal. And I honestly believe, in terms of his short films, no other video, not even the Ghost video, and that one was beyond amazing, but not even the Ghost video touches Smooth Criminal for me. There's so many layers as to why the choreography is brilliant in that one. Not only are the dancers a little bit sharper, and I'm pretty sure you probably used a couple of the same dancers from Thriller, but the choreography and the way that the dancers wear it is a little bit sharper. It's thematic in terms of what the aesthetic is, and it's the, you know, the 1920s, 1930s Fred Astaire, you know, that kind of idea. It took a lot of elements from that, pulled a little bit from Bugs Bunny. It's very animated, and it's almost comic booky, cartoonish, but in a way that is so, you have to look at every time I watch Smooth Criminal, there's another aspect of the choreo that I catch that takes my breath away. There are moments where he's dancing in the round. There's moments where there's forced perspective where he's right in your face during the choreography, and then you see at an angle, a downward angle, everybody seated doing the choreography. It's just, oh my gosh. And then the break in Smooth Criminal, where it's sort of like a drama exercise, sort of like an improv exercise, where he, basically the direction is, whatever you feel in this moment, let it out. Whether that's through movement, a lot of it was through sound. And just sort of letting out your emotions and how you feel in that moment. And he does another of those things like he did with the way you make me feel, is that he breaks off and does a live singing portion where he says, you know, he does a live singing portion there, and it starts the music right back up again. And this is where we get the iconic lean, which he actually did. He invented shoes for it to happen. I don't know if he invented it himself. He had an idea of what he wanted to happen, and somebody made that for him and invented it in terms of, this is how this will work. He patented it, though. Patents expired on that. Maybe probably shouldn't have said that, but patents expired on that. But he invented the shoes for that lean to happen, and it is the only time for me. Now, he did it, there was a couple stage performances of it early in that era, probably closer to the Dangerous era, where it was great, it was fine, it was crispy, but it was not, it was never as crisp as when it was in the video, where people, and like there was characterization, like the dancers, the characterization they had when they did this lean, no stress, just you know where to slot yourself, and just let gravity do what it do, and then come back up. And the core strength you have to actually go down to a 45-degree angle and then bring yourself back up. Nah, bruh. Like, that alone puts Smooth Criminal's choreography way above Thriller, just in terms of the ingenuity that it took to create that. But then there's, right after that, there's a part where they're dancing in a ronde, which, when you talk about that in terms of music, is when somebody starts a verse, and then a few seconds later somebody starts the same verse, possibly in a different key, but it's the same verse. Then somebody else starts again in a few seconds, the same verse. Like, they keep going around. They do that with the choreography. And because I'm not a dancer, I don't know what you would call that. I just call it ronde. Because that's what happens. And so when I first realized that, again, blew my mind. Every single time I watch Smooth Criminal, something different catches my eye. Side note, the reason why Thriller is tied, especially since I'm giving all this praise to Smooth Criminal, is because story-wise, costume-wise, makeup-wise, unmatched. That video was unreal. It's literally unreal. And the layers of it. It starts in a 50s sort of date situation, and then you find out that that's a movie and it's modern times, and then there's this flirtation, and then the fact that they're walking and singing, and the way the verses are chopped up, and then Vincent Price, and oh my god, like, yeah. So they are on the same level to me, just for different reasons. I could not split them up. I think I have the same level of affection and ardor for them equally, but again, like I said, for different reasons. So the moment we've all been waiting for, my number one video, is because, yes, of course, it's a tie. And it's a tie for the same kind of reason that Smooth Criminal and Thriller are number two. Number one is Leave Me Alone and Scream. I actually have notes for these. I didn't give you the credits for Smooth Criminal. So Smooth Criminal was released in 1989. It was directed by Colin Chilvers. The choreography, again, Jeffrey Daniel and Vincent Patterson, of course, and Michael. They had their hands in doing that. And so that's why you have these elements of hip-hop, but also these elements of, really classical jazz, ballet, Fosse-esque type choreography. I'm going to talk about the awards that it won. Smooth Criminal won the Brit Award for Music Video of the Year. Thriller was released in 1983 and directed by John Landis, another legend. Choreography, again, the iconic, legendary, brilliant Michael Peters and MJ. They choreographed it together. This one won the most awards of all of his short films. This one won the Grammy for Best Video Album. It won the Video Music Awards for Best Overall Performance in a Video and Viewer's Choice, and for Best Choreo, of course. And won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Music Video. And it, in 2009, won a spot on the National Film Registry. So, some fun little tidbits. So now back to my number one, which is Leave Me Alone and Scream. I'm going to go through the credits for these, and then I'm going to dive into why these both are my number one favorite video. So, Leave Me Alone came out in 1988. It was directed by Jim Blanchfield. It won a Grammy for Best MV Short Form. It won a VMA for Best Special Effects, and it was nominated for 4 VMAs that year, including Music Video of the Year and Viewer's Choice. Scream was released in 1995, and it was directed by the incredible Mark Romanek, who is a brilliant photographer. He doesn't photograph dance. He doesn't direct dance, which is so interesting because it's Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson, so obviously dance had to happen. But Mark Romanek, Scream won the Grammy for Best Music Video. It won the Video Music Awards for Best Art Direction, Best Choreo, and Best Dance. Okay, so let me explain. I'm going to talk about them interchangeably, sort of in the way that I did for my number two. You already know how I feel about Leave Me Alone vocally, but it's the reason why they're interchangeable to me is because these videos are two sides of the same coin. They're the exact same theme in terms of what he's talking about. The videos express his thoughts so clearly that they're practically the same video, just different aesthetics. And I'm going to go into why I think that is. Leave Me Alone is like the least subtle video, besides Earth Song, the least subtle short film that I believe Michael ever made. It's not subtle, it's very literal, and in fact, literally on the nose. There's a scene that you'll understand why I said it like that. There's so much symbolism. It's drenched in symbolism, from the sounds to the different little aspects that you have there. Even in terms of how things move, there's some animation that goes into inanimate objects. The choreography is just 10 seconds of him dancing in a Charlie Chaplin-esque outfit, black vest and black bowler hat and black pants, slacks. He's dancing with the Elephant Man's bones, because that was a big thing that people were saying. He bought the Elephant Man's bones. He did not buy the Elephant Man's bones, but, that's what they were saying. These songs are about how people are perceiving him in the media and how he's sick of it. Both Scream and Leave Me Alone are the exact same songs, just different energy in terms of execution and just different ways of expressing it. And while Leave Me Alone is heavily, you would say even oversaturated with symbolism, and I'm not going to go through every single symbol. I'm not going to go through the symbols. You're going to have to watch it for yourself and watch it again and again and again. You have to watch it at least 10 times to just get every single symbol and reference that's in there. But Scream, on the other hand, is sort of Leave Me Alone if you stripped it down to the absolute bare minimum. While Leave Me Alone is extremely colorful, it's vibrant, there's a lot of bright colors, it's crowded, it seems claustrophobic, there's so much going on, there's a lot to draw your eye to. Scream is very subtle, it's very subdued, It's black and white, first of all. It's stainless steel. It's in space. While he's down to earth dealing with this and Leave Me Alone, he's escaped and gone to space to get away from all of that. And it's just him and his sister. He's escaped it. And so everything is a lot cleaner. There's not any circus around him. In fact, he's escaped the circus and is sort of looking down on it, to be perfectly honest, while he's part of it and in fact is part of the carnival. He is a carnival attraction in Leave Me Alone. He has decided to remove himself from all of civilization on Earth and to just live in his thoughts and live in his isolation. So Scream is black and white. It's very minimalistic. It's isolated, like I said. I think that both of them are isolated, but in different ways. Michael is isolated in Leave Me Alone in that he's very much... he feels as if he's alone when it comes to how he's having to deal with the circus that's around him and about him. So he's isolated in that he's by himself dealing with this, or at least he's made it so he's by himself dealing with this. And, you know, the song even has alone in the title. He's by himself. He wants to be left alone. In Scream, he finally gets left alone. And he's not by himself dealing with this. He has his sister, the person that for the longest time he was the closest to. But he's self-isolated. While he feels like he sort of has been ostracized by society and Leave Me Alone in a certain way, he's actively and voluntarily isolated himself from society in Scream. They're both alone, and it's so funny, the idea of Scream and how it connects. The song connects so strongly to the lyrics. Like, both songs are that. They kind of directly tie into the lyrics. In space, nobody can hear you scream, and so that's why he's up there. He's up there because nobody is listening to him anyway. So here, in this world where all he has is someone who will not judge him, he's screaming his lungs out. In the video, you see him scream so loud that a glass ceiling shatters, and it shatters on top of him. And that's another bit of symbolism. There is symbolism in Scream, but there's less of it, and it's so much more subtle. It's so much more, you have to actually steep yourself into it to understand why some of the images are the way that they are. For example, this glass ceiling idea. He did scream through the glass ceiling. The most recognizable, most powerful black man on the planet. When even pop music, for all that it was kind of invented by black people, you know, on the backs of things like jazz and blues and sort of R&B, you know, pop music, pop culture was created by black people. He smashed through that glass ceiling that when he initially ventured out on his own at the Grammys, not only did they not televise him winning an award, he only won one award and was nominated for two. He gets to this point where he's at Scream level, where he's now become the most recognizable human being on the face of planet Earth. He's screaming, and that glass ceiling comes crashing down because he demanded to be let in, and now that he wants to escape it because it went beyond what he wanted and what he was ready for. So Leave Me Alone and Scream are two halves of the same whole, I think. He's speaking to the exact same thing, but now they're removed from each other. So, yeah, 1988 was when Leave Me Alone came out. Scream came out in 1995, so this, you know, it's almost a decade removed. And in 7 short years, and really that's not a long time for him to go from, you know, well, let's just sort of take it down a peg, because you had Thriller that came out a decade earlier, and that's when everything started to everything, you know what I mean? And so being a decade into this sort of media craziness that's surrounding him, for better or for worse, you know, self-inflicted or inflicted upon him, you know, he's coming again full circle to repeat the same thing, but in I think a more aggressive way. Obviously, there's more, it's crunchy guitar, there's use of very violent sound effects, you know, the electrifying of Frankenstein's monster. There's heavy crunchy guitar, him screaming, obviously. There's rough language in it. You know, it's the first time that we, in a single, now this is a pop song, because it was a single, but he's chastising his audience. It's a very straightforward attack on people who he believes have been attacking him. The same thing with Leave Me Alone, but it is a little bit more aggressive in Scream, which is funny because there's so much less visually to look at. That being said, obviously the most iconic thing about the Scream video for most people is that it's the most expensive video ever made. It came in at a hot $7 million for no reason. That was certainly, this went over budget type of thing. It was not intended to be that expensive, and he paid for most of it out of his own pocket. But he wanted it a certain way, and he wanted it. And it was also behind schedule. I think they had to shoot for an extra week. It was not intended to be that long. And a lot more happened in terms of that. Time is money, and quite literally that's, I think, the biggest reason why it was so expensive. It had less to do with what was on the set and more to do with how much time they had to take to make it, because there's not a lot on the set. There's a lot in terms of effects that have to be taken into consideration, and probably aspects of sort of getting permission to use things, because there's an anime clip in there also. In terms of favorite music videos, Leave Me Alone and Scream kind of fit the same bill. I think of all of them. I made a lot of reasons as to why I had so many ties. Of all of them, Leave Me Alone and Scream, it makes the most sense why they're both number one. There's no way I can separate them because they're literally the same exact video, except the visuals are different. And I think that might have been intentional. I don't, as I said many times, I've never spoken to him. I don't know what his mindset was. But I believe there's some intention behind Leave Me Alone being so over the top. And you may think $7 million, it has to be over the top. It's very sleek and simple, the Scream video. It's not over the top by any means. It's very, very minimalistic. They obviously had to pay for, like, using art. Like, there's a lot of reasons why it was that expensive that really doesn't add credence to it being this elaborate video, because it's not. It's very simple. It's extremely straightforward. But I think there was some intention behind the first time he had to address this idea of attacking the people who are attacking him. Is so elaborate, it's so over the top. It's because that's what his universe is, and at that point I think he really confronted it for the first time. And so he's just stuffing Leave Me Alone with every single thing that is going through his mind and everything that he's hearing. I mentioned when I was talking about the vocals for this one that there's this buzzing effect. There's so much going around him that it's in his ear, it's in his head, and him making the song the way that he did and creating the short film the way that he did is him purging himself of everything that's coming out of that. 7 years later, he's empty. Especially considering what was happening around that time, I think his soul is kind of leached dry, and at this point he has nothing left but to scream. And so instead of putting a whole bunch of fantastical elements into it, he takes it down to the bare minimum. What is it that I want? I want to be left alone. He doesn't say that the same way. He says it very, point blank and leave me alone, But he wants to actually, instead of sort of letting the circus happen around him and breaking free, he's taken it upon himself to remove himself from society and remove himself from the spectacle. There's nothing spectacular about his living environment. Not really, when you all things considered. And I just think the depth of meaning, the way that the song, these are where they are because they do absolutely hit every aspect of my criteria for what makes an amazing short film when it comes to Michael Jackson. The direction in both is gorgeous. I love the way that Leave Me Alone is directed. It seems like it's a linear single shot. It seems like it is. Just following him as he's on the circus ride of his own life. And the concepts in it, it's not subtle, it's very on the nose, and it kind of does beat you over the head with imagery and with symbolism, but I kind of love that about it because I love being able to pick things apart like that. And I love the direction of Scream. Very clean, straightforward. You can tell it was directed by a photographer because it has that kind of sheen on it, but it also has that kind of veritas, that kind of vulnerability that a photographer can get out of you. It has that. It's shot in that same way. The choreography, again, we're talking about two videos who collectively have 40 seconds of dance. And Leave Me Alone, there's a 10-second dance break of him dancing with John Merrick's Bones, right? 10 seconds, and it's amazing choreography. And you have Scream that has about 30 seconds of dance, and it wins an award for a 30-second dance break between two people who are doing the same dance and variations on it in terms of their own styles as iconic dancers. You have two dancers dancing for 30 seconds, shot by a man who doesn't shoot dance. And it wins 2 awards for dance. Like, the choreo is there. It's simple and subtle and quick, but it makes an impact. It makes an impression. People remember it. Either because it's so quirky, like Dancing with Bones, and the real uncanniness of the movements of both of them, both Michael and the Elephant Man's Bones. There's just an uncanny weirdness to the movement, but it's so simple and it's so cool. I remember when I first watched this video, not when I first watched this video, but when I had the Moonwalker, I have the Moonwalker tape. You can tell which ones I rewound a whole lot. Because the thing you have to understand about tapes is that after a while, the film wears thin, especially if you go back to the same spot over and over again. The tracking just messes up. And so that part of the film, the part of the Moonwalker tape is completely messed up. And it's because I kept rewinding it over and over again. I rewound that 10-second dance break that probably wasn't even 10 seconds. I think I clocked it in at like 8 seconds. But made an impact. The Scream dance, I rewind that thing over and over and over and over again. It's another one like Thriller where me and my brother knew the dance. There's a knees section, so we kind of have not done that anymore. But in terms of storyline, the storyline's there. And the storyline is there because of the song. This is one of those times where storyline and song are kind of tantamount to each other. And it's not that the song depends on the video. The songs stand alone very well. The songs, this is the reason why some of those, like some of the short films are lower on the list, because the song for me doesn't hold up without the visuals. In this case, you can take the song by itself and find something that will mesmerize you. And every single time you listen to it, you'll find something different, find something new to grasp onto. For both of them, the costume designs, again, the costumes in Leave Me Alone are, like, they're pretty simple. You know, costume and makeup, there's not a whole lot to them. There's a lot more costuming and makeup when it comes to Scream. But even then, they're both wearing the same outfit. The only difference is kind of how their hair and makeup is done. It's very simple, but it's effective. Because your eye isn't meant to be drawn necessarily to what they're wearing, and that's, I think, why they're in the same outfit in Scream, and why he's just kind of wearing his own clothes and Leave Me Alone. Because that's not the point of the video. But it's effective. It works. So, that is my list. The Michael Jackson was an artist in every way that you can possibly be an artist. Even in terms of just his personal life, he painted and he drew. He was an artist in every way that a person can be an artist, and that extended to his adoration and love of film. And he showed everybody just what he could do with the concepts in his own music. And he did that brilliantly with videos like Leave Me Alone and Scream. So let me go back down my list really quickly. Number 5 is a tie between Remember the Time and The Way You Make Me Feel. Number 4 is a tie between Bad and Speed Demon. Number 3 is Stranger in Moscow. Number 2 is a tie between Smooth Criminal and Thriller. And number 1 is Leave Me Alone and Scream. I intended for this to be so much shorter, but you know, I get on a tangent, y'all, and I get really excited about things and really passionate. So if you made it this far, I appreciate your presence. Thank you so very much for being here and for listening to me ramble on and get really loud and obnoxious about Michael Jackson's short films. But you know, you can't talk about Michael and not talk about his short films. Like you just it doesn't make any sense. So I appreciate your presence. I hope that you have a phenomenal rest of your week. So I hope that the rest of your week is beautiful. It's sunny but not too hot, because oh my gosh, nobody needs this heat wave. Please dissipate. But it's full of happiness, and it's full of new things to explore and discover. Give yourself some peace. Give yourself some ice cream. Even if you're lactose intolerant, there are ice creams for you. Get yourself something sweet, soft, and beautiful. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace across.